Hi, I'm Tim Constantine, and this is the Capitol Hill Show. EVs, electric vehicles, they're better, or so we're told. They're cleaner. They're more environmentally friendly. But are they? The Biden administration is pushing full steam ahead. They're forcing automotive manufacturers to sell at least 50% of their cars as either EVs or hybrids by the year 2030 and 70% by the year 2032. Can the government force the American consumer to buy one particular product? Does the American government have the authority to change the entire automotive industry? Maybe more importantly, even if they do have that authority, have they thought through the impact, the implications of the EV mandate? We'll talk with a United States Senator, with a former EPA administrator, with a representative of the Reagan, Bush, and Bush administrations, with a representative from the automotive industry, and an energy expert.
Maybe the best place to start is with one of the car makers. Jim Seary works for Cadillac. He explains the basics of their EV, the Cadillac Lyric.
It's a platform battery, meaning the bed of the body of the vehicle sits on top of them. 8 years, 100,000 mile warranty on them, and it also has a 12-volt battery under the hood for accessory mode.
There are some clear maintenance upsides to the EV.
Your first, second, third services are all tire rotations. There's no oil to change, there's no transmission fluid. It's 100% electric.
Cadillac has set 2030 as the model year with no more combustion engines.
The goal for General Motors is to be all electric by 2030 in every model. In fact, in 2 years, we're going to see an Escalade that puts out 750 horsepower, which is more than the gas engine is today. So as far as what's going to happen, it's the future. No question about it. Will we accept it? Time will tell.
For the last 20 years, America and much of the world has heard about electric vehicles, EVs. We've been told they'd be quieter, cleaner, more efficient, and more environmentally friendly. These are all things that virtually all people can be supportive of. Ford, GM, and Chrysler all began to produce hybrids to start. Toyota had one of its most popular models with the Toyota Prius. In recent years, there's been a push for all-electric vehicles. GM even went so far as to dust off their legendary name Hummer and create an all-electric SUV and truck. The public has generally been supportive of the concept of EVs, but in the last 12 months, for the first time ever, EVs have been getting some organized pushback. The question, of course, is why? The Biden administration's EPA recently finalized a rule that would force car makers to sell more than 50% of their automobiles as EVs or hybrids by 2030 and 70% by 2032. This has a significant chunk of Americans tugging hard on the reins and saying, whoa! There's a variety of reasons why Americans are suddenly concerned. First, of course, human nature and American culture. They don't like being told what to do. But second, there's a distinct lack of infrastructure in the United States to handle huge growth in the proposed number of EVs on the road. Third, the cost of the EV is considerably higher than a traditional vehicle. And finally, America's electric grid is not set up to handle all of this, but the government keeps insisting everything roll full speed ahead. We sat down with a former senior-level official from the White House administrations of Reagan, Bush, and Bush. We sat down with a former EPA administrator and with a United States Senator. We also talked with the head of the American Energy Institute. All of them expressed similar and very stark concerns about rushing America into EVs too quickly. We invited Bill Ford of Ford Motor Company and the highest level executives at GM to join us, but they politely declined. Let's start our discussion with Diana Furchtgott-Roth, who served as a senior official in the Reagan White House, the George Bush White House, and the George W. Bush White House. She is a recognized expert. Diana Furchtgott-Roth, thank you for joining us on the Capitol Hill Show.
It's wonderful to be with you. Such an honor to be on the show.
The EPA is setting new standards yet again, and they've got broad authority under the Clean Air Act to do seemingly whatever they believe is necessary, in this case, to change an entire industry, the automotive industry. And the emission standards they are now putting forth will force automakers, the traditional Fords and General Motors and Chryslers of the world, to make more than half of their vehicles by the year 2030 and 2/3 of their vehicles by the 2032 model year something other than combustion engines. Do they have the authority to broadly change an entire industry that way?
Well, they have some authority, but they have not fully justified what they're doing in terms of safety and increased cost to consumers. And they have authority to change the standards, but they don't have the authority to drive some cars off the road. So I would say that there are very serious problems with this regulation. It's going to be challenged, and I believe that it can be overturned.
Who gets hurt by this? And is that just the price you pay for the benefits that we're told this will bring?
There are so many people who are going to get hurt. First of all, it disproportionately affects poor people because they cannot afford these EVs. Second, it adversely affects small businesses and farmers because they don't have time to charge their vehicles for 2 hours a day in the middle of the day. If you have a small business and you're driving around in your pickup truck, you can't take a 2-hour break to charge it up. That's 2 hours out of your client's time. So that really means that you are severely disadvantaged, even if you can afford to buy one of these cars.
It turns out that this new clean alternative for cars has a lot of question marks when it comes to the environment. Former Environmental Protection Agency Administrator Andrew Wheeler lays out some of his concerns.
Well, I really advocate that we need to take a look at the entire life cycle of an EV car as well as the batteries. And you have to first start with the fact that the rare earth minerals used to produce the batteries are coming from places like China and the Congo, where they're using child labor, and they're using forced labor in China in order to produce the materials to go into these batteries.
Wheeler digs in deeper.
There is an end point to the battery. There used to be about 5 to 6 years per battery. They're up to about 8 years now, I believe. But you end up having toxic materials in the battery. People talk about, oh, we can recycle them. But recycling the battery is actually more expensive than building a new battery. So the companies that are reclaiming the batteries, in large part, are just putting them in warehouses or shipping them to not incinerators, to landfills. You send them to a landfill, and that you can get, because of the chemicals and the toxic materials in the battery, you can get leaching into the groundwater. You can also get fires because of the flammability and combustibility of these batteries. So we don't have a plan in this country for how to dispose of the EV batteries.
There's nothing wrong with the environmental community wanting the world to be a better place. There's certainly nothing wrong with wanting a cleaner, safer Earth. The irony seems to be that some are now worried that those good intentions are lacking in planning to make sure no harm is done.
We do not have a plan in place to deal with the waste stream that we're creating. So we may be creating the Superfund sites of the future by not having a plan today on how to deal with the waste stream.
Wheeler is clear he's actually a fan of EVs. He has practical questions and also stresses that in any industry, manufacturers have to produce a product that the public actually wants.
Please don't get me wrong, I support EV cars. I think if people want to have one, I think that's great. I support all of the above, but I think the marketplace should dictate. I don't think the federal government should be social engineering what Americans drive. I
Well,
think Americans should determine what they want to drive themselves.
And make no mistake, some Americans are choosing EVs. Dave from Washington, D.C., just drove to Florida with his wife and dog.
We drove to Kitty Hawk, and then Myrtle Beach, and now St. Augustine.
He said there was a little anxiety about charging stations, but the Tesla made it easier.
You just set a route, and then it tells you where to stop. And I had it planned out in advance, but with a couple problems. One was the range estimate did not anticipate how fast my wife likes to drive. And we would stop, and one of the best things about the Tesla is dog mode. We have a little mini golden doodle, and you just set the temperature, put it in dog mode, and the screen lights up, say, don't worry, the temperature is 72, my driver will be back shortly. And so it really helps in the hot weather, because a dog really limits where you can go and eat out and go to places that don't allow dogs. So that was one of my favorite things about it.
Although Dave clearly loved the Tesla, the practical problem of the time to recharge the battery was a concern for him.
In 30 minutes, it gives you 200 or so miles, 45 minutes typically for a full charge. And it's fine when you time it with eating, and if there's things in the area, like here, there's a great outlet mall, and I've lost my wife. I'll find her somewhere. But we stopped at one place on the way here, and it was just a bowling alley. And so we were just hanging around, waiting.
Jason Isaac is the CEO of the American Energy Institute. He questions whether EVs are even commercially viable.
It's not, and the public is expressing that recently. The support for electric vehicles is waning. The sales may still be increasing, but overall support is decreasing, and people's interest in them is decreasing. You're seeing companies like Ford. When you look at the Ford Lightning truck that sells with the extended battery, sells for $92,000. They just lowered it from $98,000. What a bargain.
Ford Motor Company cut 700 F-150 Lightning pickup truck jobs last October. In March of 2024, Ford again brought out the axe, cutting 1,400 of 2,100 jobs at the F-150 Lightning plant, citing slower than expected demand. Todd Dunn, the president of the UAW Local 862, explained. Their intentions were to build 180,000 plus units, he said. Right now, we're looking at 55,000 units they're going to build. The move comes after Ford said it would ramp up Lightning production just a year ago. It seems their estimates were more than optimistic. This followed Ford's trouble moving the electric car they dubbed the Mustang Mach-E, which some dealerships actually asked the factory to stop shipping because they weren't selling. United States Senator Marsha Blackburn confirms that Americans are not clamoring for EVs.
First of all, the technology doesn't yet exist for EVs to be workable for longer ranges and heavier loads. And when I talk to auto dealers, they say that EVs are sitting on the lot, and what people are choosing to buy is a hybrid. And but EVs they just can't sell them. So you're going to put auto manufacturers out of business and car dealerships out of business if you're going to mandate they have to take these cars that people are not buying.
Car manufacturers should not be shocked. 61% of lower-income Americans say they would not buy an EV. That number's up 18 percentage points from just a year ago. Several American auto manufacturers have posted huge losses due to EV development and sales, including Ford, which lost $4.7 billion on EVs in 2023, losing nearly $65,000 on each EV that it sold. GM lost $1.7 billion in just the fourth quarter of 2023, and that's despite strong profits overall. How can manufacturers afford to keep producing a product that a big chunk of consumers are turning their back on?
You and I are subsidizing these costs of these electric vehicles. It just published research within the last couple of months. It's nearly $50,000 that you and I don't own an electric vehicle. The people that don't own them, we're pitching in nearly $50,000 towards the cost of those electric vehicles.
I asked Furchtgott Roth if that's an accurate assessment.
Who's going to pay for the infrastructure? There is no existent infrastructure right now. There is the occasional Tesla charging station at a rest area or what have you, but in general, there's no infrastructure in place for this. How is that going to happen in 5 years? Who's going to pay for it? And who benefits from it ultimately? Who will reap the benefits of the charges that come, the financial charges that come from those electric chargers?
Well, Teslas are very popular. 2/3 of the vehicles sold, electric vehicles sold right now are Teslas. And Tesla has been putting in place the charging stations. But for these mammoth amounts of charging stations required, the Inflation Reduction Act and the Infrastructure Act provide funds for the federal government to put these charging stations in place. So we're going to be dependent on federal government charging stations. Wherever the federal government decides that there should be charging stations, that's where they will go. And there's amounts allocated to each state. And Wyoming said, can we put our charging stations where everybody goes? In Yellowstone National Park, other places where the tourists go. The federal Department of Transportation said, no, we have to have them every certain number of miles on the highways. They have to be evenly distributed, and they cannot be more than a mile from the highway. And Wyoming said, well, can we at least put them where gas stations are? Because that way people will be able to stop. They can use the restrooms. They can go to the convenience stores. And DOT said no. And at one point, Wyoming said, all right, well, we don't want these because we're going to have charging stations way out all over the state where no one goes, and we're going to be responsible for maintaining them. So it's a very real problem. With gas stations, these were put in place by oil companies, by different private individuals that wanted to open gas stations. This is a completely different phenomenon. This is industrial policy at a massive scale. It has never worked before, and it really is not going to work now.
It's not just the car themselves that every taxpayer is paying for. It's the infrastructure too, although not very efficiently.
We are absolutely building something there is no demand for. Billions of dollars spent in this administration and the Inflation Reduction Act, billions of dollars. And by January of 2024, one electric vehicle charging station had been built with those billions of dollars.
Former EPA Administrator Wheeler points out that the U.S. government has a history of questionable results when it tries to dictate winners and losers in the marketplace.
But you had the stimulus money from 2009 on the clean energy, clean technology money that was spent by Congress and the Obama administration. Something like over half of the companies, maybe 40% of the companies, ended up going bankrupt within 5 years. So where did that money go? I don't think there's ever really been a thorough investigation.
Several automakers, including Bentley, GM, Ford, Mercedes-Benz, and Honda, have scaled back their previous EV goals as consumers decline to buy the product.
Cadillac, part of General Motors, which the government bailed out just a decade ago. Cadillac has said that beginning in the 2030 model year, they will have no combustion engines. They will have no hybrids. It will be 100% environmentally friendly green energy. Should Cadillac be worried, should GM stockholders be worried about the future, that 5 years from now, you will not be able to buy a combustion engine Cadillac?
Absolutely, and they will reverse their decision very soon, if I had to guess, because the production numbers for electric vehicles, every major manufacturer, are being cut. And so I would suspect that Cadillac will reverse their decision. Buick, there were dealers that Buick said, we're going to go 100% electric, and telling the dealers they have to put this infrastructure in. Well, there are dealers that just said, take it. You buy me out. You can have the dealership. I'm not going to do it. They want to sell things that consumers want. And right now, by and large, consumers do not want electric vehicles.
Jim from Cadillac had a warning for those folks who prefer their traditional engine cars.
Like anything else, they don't like change, but it's coming.
One universal concern that seemingly everyone has is how America's power grid is possibly going to handle the huge increase in demand if 50% to 70% of all cars are being plugged in every night.
If you look at needing to charge batteries, if you're looking at capacity, then what you know is it takes, whether you're looking at kilowatts, megawatts, gigawatts, it takes a lot of electricity to generate what is going to be necessary for an electric transportation fleet.
Longtime White House senior official Furchtgott Roth concurs.
And we haven't even talked about the electrical system, the cost on the grid, and are we going to manage to have all the transmission lines? We have blackouts right now. If 70% of new car sales were electric, we'd have even more blackouts.
I think of last summer when California literally asked its citizens, please do not charge your car overnight because their grid was so strained. And I thought, if you live there and your only choice is an electric vehicle and it plugs in your garage, I'm now being told, don't use my vehicle.
And that was within a month of Governor Newsom requiring that only electric vehicles be sold in California from 2035 on.
Administrator Wheeler is singing from the same songbook.
There's two other big complicating factors in this, and that is we don't have the charging infrastructure in place, particularly out west for EV cars. And then second, we don't have the electricity infrastructure. There's actually an article in the Washington Post today saying that we don't have enough energy planned for our country over the next 10 years. That doesn't even take into account the amount of energy that would be needed for 2/3 of the cars to be EV batteries.
Jason Isaac may explain in the simplest terms exactly what the problem facing the electric grid is.
We don't have the electricity right now to meet the needs if even half of our population had electric vehicles. Something to consider is when you have a Tesla at a fast charging station, and granted, it may only be there for 20 to 30 minutes. It's pulling the equivalent of electricity off the grid that's required to power a small grocery store. When you have 4 Teslas charging at a supercharger station, it's the equivalent of a Walmart supercenter. Big, massive facility that's using electricity to power refrigerators and freezers, and the lights are just nothing compared to some of the other power requirements in that store. But that's something that people don't understand, the electricity demands that are going to be required, and where are you going to get that electricity from? You're going to get it from fossil fuels. I mean, there's a battery manufacturing facility in Kansas that just kept a coal-fired power plant online because they needed the electricity to produce batteries for electric vehicles.
Despite the overwhelming drain on the grid, Dave loves the Tesla.
We like the way it drives. It's very quiet, very peppy. We like the dog mode, and my wife just wants a Tesla.
Ms. Furchtgott Ross isn't just worried about the practical impact of transitioning to EVs. She doesn't believe that the 2030 deadline will come to fruition. But if it does, she sees a devastating impact on the economy.
But there would be vast losses of employment. In the auto industry, the CEO of Ford has said there would be 400,000 fewer jobs. In the auto parts, among mechanics who now repair your car, you can go to your local gas station and your car can get fixed or the oil can get changed. I mean, all those people are going to be out of work. So as well as some of the gas stations that would go down, auto parts, mechanics, auto workers, and these jobs, a lot of these jobs would go to China because China is the predominant manufacturer of batteries right now. They make 80% of the world's batteries.
Besides the many questions and even more answers, I had one nagging question remain.
Why is the U.S. government investing? What is government's role? Why is the U.S. government investing in auto manufacturers, EV manufacturers, and in the battery
manufacturers as opposed to private industry doing that on their own?
Well, there just isn't the demand for private industry. In fact, a lot of companies are cutting back. So Apple was going to make an electric vehicle. It's decided it's going to focus on AI instead. Fisker is in deep financial problems. Ford is cutting back on its production of F-150 Lightning pickup trucks because people don't want to buy them. They found that they can't be loaded or they can't tow as much as the gasoline-powered version. Mercedes, BMW have pulled back on their target of being all electric by 2030. So the private sector is not investing in this as much as the government would like.
For years, the American public was charged up about an EV future. With practical questions coming from so many angles and very little in the way of real answers, it seems that much of the enthusiasm, at least for now, is unplugged.